And then in honor of the glorious Virgin, in stimulating communion with Mary, completely filled with and obedient to grace. Here we have that model of a discerning love and a loving discernment. To be continuously on track with our lives and obedient to the direction that they take us. Now that's one reason why you did this autobiography. How has your life been leading you? And so that's what you want to be faithful to. Kathy Sherman said it so well one time. She said, we sit at the feet of our own story. You know, that's where the wisdom is. And that's where that discernment is. It's how we stay, and to stay faithful of that is Mary, the model. Then in stimulating communion with Saint Joseph, they will be one in the service of each other and in the service of the neighbor without distinction. So we've gone back to that all-inclusive where we started over in point 1. And they will try to have a cordial charity. And again, we look at the 17th century meaning of cordial. You've probably all heard this before. The cordial was a medicinal substance that was given to people with heart trouble. If you had a heart that with an indifferent beat, they gave you a cordial. If you were sort of fading away, they gave you a cordial. It was medicine for the heart. So it's an elixir. It's a stimulant. There I said lut. Stimulant. And an animative agent. So it facilitates, it inspires, it moves toward, it reconciles, it connects, it creates the friendship that and the relationships that we need in order to communicate the active and inclusive love, the total double union. So we've come full circle with these 6 points. And I like to think, you know, this is basically the rule. And then he summarizes it on the next page. We'll take a break in a minute here. He
What
says,
page are you on, Marcia?
on page 6. So he's gone through the 6 points. He's told us what the goal and the purpose of the association is. And then he says, well, let me summarize. In a spirit, hopefully, of complete humility, gentleness, candor, simplicity, zeal for union with God among themselves and with every kind of neighbor, their continual care will to make the dear life of Jesus, Mary, and Joseph live in them and in all their houses, and to revive in their times the spirit of the Christians of the early church. So, they're not just told to do little devotionals in honor of Jesus, Mary, and Joseph, litanies and so on. No, they're supposed to communicate this zeal, this life of discerning, this discerning life stance, and this cordial charity to one another. This is the spirit that should animate the house. And as for the neighbor, they will lead them according to their capacity, the neighbor's capacity, to profess all the virtues mentioned above, especially the imitation of the life of Jesus, Mary, and Joseph in the total double union, among themselves with God and every kind of neighbor. So, they not only do this kind of animation within their homes, but also with their and among their neighbors. And somewhere else in here he says that what their duty is, what their work is the formation of life for lay people. So there you have it. So how can you live? How can we live these 6 points and the summary? Okay, he says, through the maxims. And we'll pick that up. Okay, so what's the point in all of this? Do you have a religious imagination? If so, what is it? Once Andrew Greeley wrote an essay on Catholic imagination. And I thought, oh, I have a Catholic imagination. Incense, beeswax, stained glass windows, that gets me every time. I have a Catholic imagination. But what's a religious imagination?
Harmony among people.
Harmony among people. Mary?
I was thinking of Ignatius, see God in all things.
To see God in all things. Mary Jo?
It makes me think of Flannery O'Connor and her many strange images of God in her writing.
Okay, Flannery O'Connor's strange images, yeah. All of that is an imagination that, at least in our particular stream of spirituality, is pretty much called for as probably an inborn talent, whether we recognize it or not. Speaking to somebody here. To think through your tonight, when one of the assignments is to look through your autobiography and see where you see more deeply, or you experience reality more deeply, more transcendently than first meets the eye. So that it's an inner seeing, and that's what's necessary if we're going to get anything out of this, out of the maxims. But first, see it in your own text. I wanted to go back, just, can you stand there a little bit longer?
Sure, yeah, sure.
I wanted to go back to something you said, Dorothy, when you brought up the egoic self. And I know that psychology is important to you because we've had this conversation before. And she says that maxims are detrimental to one's psychological development. And probably a lot of things are. But I want to go back, I want to just talk about Thomas Keating's 3 fundamental drives for the human. And those of you that have heard me do this before, please excuse me. But he says that we have 3 fundamental drives. And these are necessary in order for us to become fully who we are meant to be. So they are survival and security. I mentioned these the other day, or in passing, I think maybe this morning or something. And then affection and or affirmation. And power and control. Okay, so these are absolutely necessary for the development of the ego. For the individuation of the human. It's necessary to know what we need in order to survive, in order to feel secure. We need to know what we need and get in terms of affection and affirmation. We need to know we have power and control over our own lives and over our environment. When little tots are saying no, that's what they're doing. They're figuring out how to take control of their lives and so on. It's why you cuddle little kids incessantly. It's why you are, steady in your training of what's right, what's wrong, so on. It's why you give them everything they need so that they do grow up with a sense of security, and so on. So that when you reach, by the time we reach the middle of our lives, then what happens is that these things begin to move into a transformative stage. We're transformed, I'm going to say by life and grace. But basically life happens to us and we know, we begin to understand how survival, security, affection, all of these are only as good for us as they are good for everybody else. So that my survival isn't important to me unless all of us are going to survive. When you think about the ecological movement today, the care for the planet, the concern about life on the planet, and so forth, all of these movements are the transformation of the survival security fundamental drive in humans. People are getting the idea that unless we all survive, nobody will survive. That personal survival, personal security is not as important as everybody's. That is the transformation of the ego, the survival and security. Same way with affection and affirmation. Unless all of us are loved, unless others feel the love, unless the planet itself is cared for with tenderness and compassion, then my need is not going to be met. You see, it's a totally self-givenness. It's an unselfish gesture, finally.
So it's all about interconnectivity.
It is about interconnectivity.
Everything balances everything else.
It's coming to grips with the implicate order. That all of us are implicated in this. And I have no power unless all of us are empowered. And so the control I have is what I want to give to others so that they can prosper. So that, when we are talking about in the maxims of self-giving and all of this, which we will get into, the death to self and so on, as he expresses it, what he's talking about, Madai is talking about the transformed ego, which I was calling the egoic self, or the egotistical self. You can call it that. I'm trying to think, what's his name that...
False self.
Who?
Richard Rohr, false.
No, not Rohr, but the fellow that writes... Oh well. Anyway, the idea of the egoic self is the egotistical self. And the more, what we're always moving toward, like Maxim 73 is what this is about. To live out our whole lives as God desires, or as, the founder of the universe, however you want to call God. What God desires is the wholeness of all things. I think it's Maori Lacuna that talks about the creation as an ecology, an implicate order in which everything is connected to everything, and therefore everything is for everything else. And we become truly human, or truly who we are called to be, if we are truly for others. But we cannot give ourselves away unless we have something to give. So it's extremely important in the first stages of life to claim the drive of survival, security, affection, affirmation, and power and control, and so forth. To develop that fully so that you know when you're handing it over. Does that make sense? And the handing over of this is actually the third degree of humility, or the highest stage of zeal, is that total sacrifice, total self-giving of the self for others, for the good of others. I think for me, it's always interesting to me when I get in a pickle, or if I'm challenged, or in an argument, or in some way meet a problem, or some kind of hitch along the way, then it's interesting to me to check back before I react, which of these drives is being challenged in me. You know, when you find yourself angry about a situation, which one of these got ticked? You know, and that again, that's a piece of self-knowledge. You know, is it because you've lost control of a situation? It's because you didn't get the affirmation you wanted? Do you feel like your survival is, or your security is threatened? You know, where are you caught? And it's usually you can name one of these three drives. And usually we have a favorite one. I'm not telling you mine. You probably, those of you that know me know it, but anyway. But you know, if you watch yourself, you listen to yourself, then you know this is where I get stuck.